Hi guys, and welcome along to this video. This one's a little bit different in that it's involving a Mac Classic series computer. This is the Mac Plus. It's one I picked up during COVID times, and it caught my eye because of the branding it had on the front of the case, and I cannot find any information out about it. It caught my eye and I thought, oh, I'll take it and have a look and play with it. Not done a lot of Mac gear in the past, during my tenure of doing PCs, etc. So I had to go online and learn up a lot, and I'd like to have a big shout out to Adrian's Digital Basement, as he does some really good videos on maintenance and repairs and that for the Classic series. So if you're interested in learning more about these machines, go and check out his YouTube page. It's really good. Thanks again, Adrian. So anyway, it's going to be a multi-part video, this, because there is a few things with it that I'm not happy with, and it doesn't boot up at all. So it's dead in the water. What we're going to have to do is dive into this, pull it apart, follow some of Adrian's advice, and see if we can get this up and running. So grab yourself a drink, something to snack on if you like, and get a comfy chair. The thing is too, guys, is this may be multi-parts. I'm waiting for parts like I am for the Coleco, so I've got to do something else. It will be the same with this as well, as you'll find out through this video. But I do have some other things to do. I got some parts in for some old 486 and early Pentium 1 PCs, some Dallas clocks. So what I'm going to do is I might just do a fill-in with doing some of that basic stuff in a basic test. Those I'm not keeping. I want to get them working and move them on. I don't want to pull gear out just to make a fill-in. So this is why I'll just do stuff I have hanging around. But anyway, guys, there is lots of little bits and pieces to do around here. And as I say, sit back, relax, and let's get on with it. Okay guys, so opened it up and went to pull the baseboard out, and I'll show you what I found. Now with the baseboard, when I tried to get it out, the large ribbon cable, this one, wouldn't come off the board. Now the small ribbon cable, the small one, plugs into this connector. The large one was sitting on top of this chip. Now I'm picking this as a SCSI controller of some sort, because the four corners of this header were soldered on one of each of these pins on either end, but not the rest. So I was taking that, what they've done is they've attached it with those pins and bent the side ones in so that they brush up against the legs, and that would give it a connection. Not the best idea, but this was modded by looking at it by the parts with some form of Australian company that made this adaptation kit up. Whether the person has put it in themselves or whether it was done overseas, I don't know. There is very little information on this. As I said, even the name of the Mac Classic, called Black Mac, I have no idea, and I can't find any information about it. So what I'm going to do, I had to pry it, and they popped off the corners because I didn't know how it was holding on. I didn't know if this was actually a socket originally, and that those were pins into a socket and it was just stuck over time. But they came away nicely because of the way they were soldered on. And I think it was just rested down there, and then they just heated up the sides and soldered it to get it on, looking by the little bits of melt on the corners. So what I'm looking at doing is I think I'll remove this chip and I'll put a socket in here. And then what I will then do is, or actually, I could actually, remove this chip, and I could probably solder this header into the board, and then I can make a daughter board which will have a socket for the chip and to go from the header pin to the SCSI controller or the SCSI breakout board that's up the top here with the SCSI drive. I think that's probably a nice way, because that way then it can be taken out. Like other than trying to physically pull it apart, there was no way I knew how to get this out. Now that I look at it, there is a header pin up on the board up there, but to me that's a bit of a silly idea. If they're going through all the trouble of trying to do this, why not remove it, put a socket in, and do it the other way? Because you take that out and either put a socket in so you can actually plug this in, and then that can go on the board, or you can just plug the chip back in here if you didn't want to use the SCSI. There are more modern versions of the SCSI unit, blue SCSI and things like that. I do have one of those that I can look at later on, but I want to get this up and running to start with, and I think it'd be nice to get it running with the original old hardware as well. So that's what we'll do. We'll go down the track of that, I think, and desolder this chip. It's a 40 pin, so I'll just put in a standard 40 pin. I won't worry about a tuned socket, because in the ROM chips here, these are two updated ROMs. That's an 8283 ROM. That's an 8586 along with that. So these are probably two later model ROMs that have been put in here at some stage, and that's why they're in sockets. So that's the high and low ROMs. So what I will do is I will desolder this, but what I will do, I think, is have a look and see if I can get a replacement one of these. If I can, because I don't know what's going to happen to this trying to get it out. As you saw on some of the other stuff where I was on the Coleco and that, when I was trying to remove some of the bigger chips, it was really hard, and you don't want to heat the boards too much. There's quite a bit of plastic and that around here. There's a good heat shield here to protect the capacitors on that side, but you don't want to be throwing too much heat into these boards because they will blister, and you don't want to be putting too much heat into the individual pads to try and desolder them. But plenty of flux, and we may be able to get it off. I'm hoping anyway. So I will do that. I'll jump online and see if I can still get these, and if I can, it might be worth looking at grabbing one or two just to be safe. And then I think get that out, put a socket in, and then I'll probably take this ribbon cable off of this board. Right guys, so what I've decided to do, now I've got that going, I was going to look at remaking this board, because the way they had this set up, they had this over the top of the SCSI chip, and they just tacked the four corner pins to hold it there, and the other pins on this header cable were just touching the pins of the chip, and I thought, well, that can cause all sorts of problems. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll desolder this, put a socket in, make a new one of these boards, put two sockets in, one for the header cable and one for the chip. And then I started thinking, well, that's a lot of work, and then I got to wait for them to come and pay for the boards and so forth, new components and that. And I'm thinking, well, for a one-off, why bother? So what I've decided to do is I'm going to take the header off this side of the ribbon cable. Now it doesn't use all the pins. One side it does. The other side it only uses one pin, but I'm going to put 3 on it so I can tack one at either end. So that'll just stop the whole ribbon cable from pulling up. So I'm going to do that, and I'll probably use some hot glue or something to glue it down. But what I'm going to do is I've marked where pin 1 is, and I'm going to do it on that side of the board. So I'm going to solder the 3 across here, and then I'm going to solder the others there so the cable comes off this way. Because then that will get mounted onto the side of the hard drive. This can still run down and plug into the socket that's going to be on here. It just saves me having to remake another board. So I thought, well, I'm going to do that. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I've cut the wires off of the ones I don't want. These are the 3 long ones that need to go right over this other side. The others are all pin for pin across the back here. And looking at this here, when they made it, I would have thought they would have put 2 sockets in here and wired them across. And that way they'd go, remove the chip from here, we'll put a socket in here, and you just go cable from here onto one socket on here, and the controller chip would go in the second socket. And that way it wouldn't matter if you had a SCSI drive plugged in or not internally. Now I'm picking probably the later model Mac Pluses had a header for the version 2s on the boards, because they had the internal hard drives, so they would have, I'm pretty sure, had some form of header internally to actually do that, whereas these ones didn't. So this was their afterthought when they put them in. But I think it gets me out of a bind. So I have the socket here for that to go into, and it shouldn't be too hard to take that out. And I've got sockets here to put on in here, and then the cable will be all done, and it can go on there and straight up into onto this motherboard and done. Alright, so I will get on and do that. So I'll do this board, and then I'll remove that chip and put a socket in there. So I will carry on now and get back to you when we're done. Okay guys, as you can see, this is what I was talking about doing. It's taking the header off, because the header would have gone that way, so the ribbon cable would have been on that side of it. So I've just taken the 3. This one I accidentally cut off, but it made it easier putting these other ones on, and I just put a bridging wire across it. So that's working fine. And then the other ones were pin for pin across the back here, and I just made sure I had the right number of cables going across. So I mean, that's on there. So what I'm going to look at probably doing is putting some hot glue down, maybe. Take the black tape out, put some hot glue across here just to hold all this down. I might even put some self-adhesive sticky tape under here, the foam back stuff, and that'll just help hold that in place. And that's the one that's going to go into the board. So then where this header pin used to plug into here, that's where the chip's going to go into now. So it just saves me having to, being a one-off, it saves me having to remake a board, and I can do it this way. It wasn't too bad. I mean, if I needed to space out the soldering, I could have come down to the header pin down here where some of them missed the odd pin and went down through here. I could always done that way, but I think this is fine. So what I'll do is I'll dig out the hot glue gun and I'll hot glue all that down and make sure it doesn't go anywhere. But as you can see, I didn't lose much. There's only a little bit of the cable. So yeah, I think that was a win. So that I'll chuck in me bin of bits, because I could always use these. I can always use these header pins, and that's the back to it as well. Just that these were so old that the clips that actually hold them down and closed actually broke. But I could always glue that down, put it in, crimp it on, and actually put it in with a bit of hot glue or with a bit of glue of some sort. I mean, it stays there if I push it on, but it won't clamp on like it normally would have. So I mean, I'll hang on to that because that can always be useful. And I'll clean all these bits off, and as I said, I'll dig out the hot glue to do that, and then the next bit would be to take this off. But what I'm going to do is have a hunt to see if I can get another one of those in case I need it, and just see the price of them too. Alright, so I'll go and do that until we come back. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do is remove this chip. So I've got some flux, we're going to put some flux on it, some new solder which will soften the solder up from the old stuff that's on here, and I've got my desoldering pump on. But what I'm going to do also is this bottle, I don't have anything in it because this is where I put my waste IPA. When it's dirty I put it in here so I don't put it on anything good. But I'm going to stick it underneath here and just prop this up on a slight angle for me. It makes it easier for me to get in here to do what I need to do. So I'm going to do that. So the first thing I've got to do is go through and reflow these with some fresh solder and put some flux on it. If I have issues, I will probably use the hot air and give it a little bit of heat. I don't want to destroy this chip if I can help it. I want to try and get it out as quick and as easily as possible. So hopefully this will work. I'm picking it well because there's not a lot of heavy planes on here. It doesn't actually use a lot of the pins, so I'm hoping it's going to go fairly fast for me. Anyway, we will carry on and do some more. Just give it a bit of a quick clean, just checking it over. Make sure there's no shorts or bridges or anything in it. All looks good. Yep, these all look good. No, mate, that looks fine. Alright, so that's all done. So, as I say, the only thing I've got to do is I've got to hot glue this up. I'll clean the legs up on here with the soldering iron, just pull the excess solder off it, plus where they put the blobs on the corners. There's a bit of a mess in it. I'll do that, and then I'll use the IC straightener to straighten the pins, and then I'll pop it into the socket up here. We might give it a try and see if it works. Alrighty, so I will get on with that. I will come back to you when we're ready to carry on. Okay, so I've got that on. I've decided not to hot glue it just in case there is an issue with this. So I've used some double-sided tape on the back of the ribbon, and I put some on there, and I put some across the top, and I just left the cover for the adhesive on there just so it doesn't stick to anything. So that's in there. I popped the IC in there. You saw me, I just used the desoldering gun, went through and just sucked off all the excess solder on any of the pins and then straightened them. A few of them were sort of bent in a U, so that's why I had to use the pliers just to take that crinkle out of them, because otherwise if you try to put them in a socket they're going to bend under, so that's why I did that. So anyway, those are all done. I might have to just touch up the corners of these ones where it was soldered onto this chip. There's a little blobs of solder on those, so I might have to just touch those up too. As you saw, the IC straightener, that's the big one. So I might do those, and then I can look at putting it back together, and we'll see if the SCSI works. So I'll turn the gun on, and I'll just pull the solder off these, and then I'll put it back on the bench, and we'll put it back together. Alright? Okay guys, so what I've done is, when they mounted this drive, they've mounted it upside down. Now, in all my years that I've been in the industry and that, the three no-nos of mounting a hard drive of these older styles was you never mount them upside down, you never mount them on their heads, and you never mount them on their bums, facing up. You can mount them on their sides, and you can mount them the way they're meant to be mounted, flat. You don't mount them any of the other ways, because it puts stress on the motor bearings and that inside here, and it causes them to have premature failure. So that's one thing I've always learned over the years in being in this industry. When I was in the industry for years, never mount them upside down on their heads or on their tails. You always mounted them flat or on their sides. That's it. That's what I've done. The holes they've drilled, they obviously drilled them upside down. So what I did is I just used some double-sided tape, and I got some anti-static foam that I stuck to the side to make it a tighter fit, and I put some underneath so that it won't short out on the metal or the screws that bolted onto the floppy drive case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the floppy drive out before I sit this in, because the floppy drive's got to come out and be checked anyway. Alright, so I'll get on with that. I'll get the rest of it up here and we'll put it back together. Alright guys, we're getting ready to put it all back together now. I still need to take the floppy drive out of here first. This, I've used some wide double-sided tape because the mount holes, because this was upside down, this board would screw through and into the bottom of the hard drive. The way they've made it, the mount holes are up near the top, so when they've done the board and they've made this mount, they've done it back to front. So anyway, or the other thing is this was meant to have gone the other way around, but further down with the holes further down. It doesn't really matter. I've got it on there, it's not going anywhere. The board's in here, so I've got to put this through this hole so it can plug into the back here. I've cleaned all these tips up, so they're all good. This is going to be the real, because I can't unplug it off here, this is going to be the real mucky bit. And thinking about it now, I shouldn't have stuck it to this until I'd gotten it in, but then it would make it hard to get out anyway. But if this was mountable, it would have been easier to plug it off here and just put it in and that, and then put the hard drive in and then screw it on. Later on I might look at making a new frame for it if I end up hanging on to this. Other than that, it'd be a pain in the neck if I had to pull it apart and do anything else with it. But as I said, I'm not a big Mac person, so for me it's neither here nor there. But what I will do is I will pop this floppy out now. And I worked out, I was trying to work out how the SCSI drive got its power off of this board, because I didn't sort of see any normal power connectors going to the board. This little ribbon cable here comes from the back of the floppy drive port, the external one. And so what it is they're taking the 5 and 12 volt rails off of that. So that's coming up, comes through, goes to the floppy drive, and then goes up to this hard drive up top. So yeah, it's a pretty ingenious way of doing it, but I just don't know if it would have the power to actually run everything. That might be why the board is set slightly higher in the 5 volts as well, because the extra 5 volt logic that the SCSI is running, as opposed to the 4 megs of RAM and that are in the board. But anyway, that's the floppy drive out, so that's one we have to have a look at to make sure that it's working good. But for now, we don't need it in the machine, because I'm pretty sure the SCSI will be self-booting. So that's that done. What I will do now, let's lift this up. I'll put these screws out the way. And this is what I'm saying, is that it becomes a bit of a pain because the hard drive mounts into here where the floppy is, and then that cable's got to go underneath and into here along with the other one, and the way this overhangs, this makes it really difficult. But I will get onto it and do what I can, and we'll see how I go. Well guys, there you have part 1. I've stopped it there because this machine was not powering on. Now I didn't like the way they'd done the SCSI on it, so that's why I've done the main board first. And also that if I need to replace the SCSI chip, I would have time for it to get here. I've ordered one anyway, and as you saw on the video, the original NEC chip, they want New Zealand around about $60 plus freight. Now you can get the AMD AM chip, exactly the same model, including freight, for $23. Why? Because of a name? Who knows? So I've got one coming in, and I did my research and I pulled up the schematics, and they are pin for pin identical. I think they also said that the AMD was fractionally faster with the bus and transferring the data, so that'd be a plus. So anyway, I've got that on the order and coming in, and I'm also waiting for the bits for the Coleco to come in. The next part in this series will be with the Black Mac, will be to do with the power supply. That is a major, because if we don't have the power supply, we don't have a Mac. So stay tuned guys, and wait for the next episode, and that we will be looking at the power supply and seeing if there's any issues with it, which I take it there is, because it was dead as I said, but could be a fuse, who knows. We will pull that out, and I will go through some of Adrian's diagnostics to have a look and see if we can find out what is going on. So until next time guys, have a great day, have a great week. Until next, ciao.